Hey everyone, welcome back to our next Qualt Q&A video conversation, just informal chats on really important topics with really smart people. I'm thrilled today to welcome one of the smartest folks I know, Brandon Garina, who is with IBM iX. He and I have the privilege of working together in past life and just learning so much from him in my experience that I wanted to bring him here to talk about a really relevant topic around how do you reimagine these digital human experiences today from end to end. So without further ado, Brandon.
Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate it. Yeah, and just to add a little more color there, my role here at IBM is a partner within our iX practice. And some of the cool things I get to do is piece together a lot of the marketing technologies that really enable some of the best darn experiences on the planet.
Love it. The best darn experiences on the planet are what consumers are demanding these days. So you guys are the best at doing that. That's great. So to expand on that a little bit, could you tell us a little more about, I know that you have a pretty unique background in optimization. Could you tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so my journey began probably around 2007. And I was with a company called Atlas, which is now part of Facebook. We were doing all sorts of usability studies, JavaScript tag based, to really identify and pinpoint where the breakpoints existed in these websites. And that was an epiphany for me, because coming from the world of advertising and design, I was now, unveiling this world of data and insights that could now inform all of my exercises. And that's when I began to do A/B testing, multivariate testing. And it was using a lot of the proprietary tools. And it wasn't until I went to Razorfish and Accenture where it opened my eyes to the suite of options and possibilities. I mean, it began with Optimizing and Optimost. I worked a lot with SiteSpect and Informatica, now Adobe Target. And the results that I was getting was mostly in the financial services sector, the banking, the payments, insurance. And I was, it opened my eyes to really the need within that industry vertical and sector. And I started to really specialize there from that point forward in the financial services vertical.
I love it. I love that you were one of the early adopters and real pioneers. That's always something I've enjoyed in our conversations of just the testing and optimization space. And I think one of the really valuable perspectives you bring is today that space has changed so much and you have to stay on the forefront of it, which you do so well. So kind of elaborating on that, I'd love if you could talk for a second about specifically the work that you lead within the IBM iX team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm continuing to use that brand that I built, that personal brand in the financial services vertical. And one of the things I'm doing right now, you heard me mention Adobe earlier, and that's really where we're looking to exercise a differentiated partnership that we have with Adobe. And within the financial services vertical, we can do really cool stuff to secure lots of these experiences behind the firewall. When you think about end-to-end journeys, it really starts with a prospect all the way through to a known customer. And traditionally, those have been completely different platforms. So to unify all of that really is groundbreaking. But I still start every engagement with a rich discovery phase. And that includes user research, competitive analysis, behavioral analysis, all the stuff that the muscles that I built earlier in 2007 still, come to bear here on a day-to-day basis. And what I'm seeing is that there's a pretty big opportunity for us to rethink, reimagine, and reinvent in ways that are becoming more and more urgent than in the past.
You mentioned reinvention and reimagination. I'm curious what you think about why it's important to think about it as an end-to-end journey when reimagining these human experiences in the digital space.
Yeah, to give a little plug to one of our leaders here at IBM, Bridget Bryn-Crelligan, she said, the last best experience that anyone has anywhere becomes the minimum expectation for the experience they want everywhere. And the reason why I carry that with me is because it's really hard for experienced leaders to predict where a customer journey might begin or end. And as a result, the old habits of designing these point solutions have to really stop. You really have to take a step back to think about all these variety of touch points for those very reasons, right? For that very philosophy around perceptions, consumer perceptions. And that's not going to be just within your vertical. It really is going to be the experience they had with opening up their mobile phone that morning, ordering their food delivery, and booking whatever future travel thing we may be able to take down the road.
Travel. What is this travel thing you speak of? I know we're getting back there. We're getting back there. But no, I mean, you're describing like a pretty really relevant and different term of last touch attribution. When you really think about it, that last touch attributed is your new benchmark going into the next experience. So it's a different way to think about that for sure. We talk a lot about really how to get around all of this, but I'm curious what you see as one of the bigger challenges that informs new experiences, new segments, new products. You're bringing so much of that to life in the market. What do those challenges look like?
It's two words: the democratization of data. And I think that the idea of your insights team, data and analytics team being a separate team, living in this sort of center of excellence, is not sustainable any longer. And what I mean by democratizing, we need to unlock and enable frontline marketers, content creators with these insights, arming them not just with that, but the ability to query in an easy, intuitive way, and with the ability to then immediately affect change to those experiences. And this isn't just because the cool tech is there. The cool tech is there because consumers were stomping their feet demanding it. The tech has arrived. The platforms have arrived. The techniques have arrived. Surprisingly, though, there's still this slow go at adopting this, particularly within the financial services vertical, which is where I spend all my time.
Yeah, and you mentioned the extra challenges that sometimes go with that in terms of security that you have to solve for and things like that. So that certainly resonates. Organizations, as they think about this, I'm curious what your thoughts are for really how they can put a system in place. You talk about the importance of democratizing insights, and I couldn't agree more. But how do they really think about putting that system in place to apply sentiment and behavioral insights to affect change within their work?
The companies who are doing it well have embedded it into the culture of every campaign and every experience that they launch. It's a line item in the creative brief. It's baked into the requirements of the build. So there's modularity, so that there's that sort of access. And that is the North Star that we should all be looking towards, where it's embedded. There really is so little reason why we cannot do that. I think it's really just a complacency. It is still a fear that, oh gosh, that's the data stuff. That's what the data scientists do. It's like, no. We've now arrived at a new paradigm where it's at our fingertips.
Oh, I love that so much. You just make it tactical. It feels real when you say, no, it should be in the creative brief. It should be in the dev spec. It should be in the design requirements. I love that. Oh, I want that needle pointed somewhere. Is it in the brief? So, as companies think about taking that on, those tactical guidance ideas are really valuable. But then there's this bigger existential question of, how do we know if it's right to prioritize like a lift and shift, or is this bigger than that? And how do we know if it needs to be a focus on a complete re-platform? And you're so close to so many projects that have to make that decision. I'm curious for your thoughts on that and which is really more common.
All right, well, you're just describing how my last 3 weeks have gone, where we're having this debate right now with one of my clients who I love. They're near and dear to my heart. But the struggle is that the organizations are still trying to cost cut. And by cost cutting, they think, I want to just move to the lower cost platform. I want to get them into the cloud. I want to look at security. But what they're not realizing is that these new platforms, I happen to work a lot with Adobe's AEM. This is designed for purpose, built for purpose for marketers on the front line, for experience owners on the front line to own this, to work more efficiently, to whistle while they work, quite frankly. And with that, they'll be able to then delight customers more readily. I mean, the idea that you have 10,000 pages within your content library is no longer acceptable. You have the ability to templatize, to unify, to simplify. And personalization becomes no more a buzzword. Now it becomes something that we live and breathe. Based on who you are, it's going to render this experience different for you. And the only way that we can do that, we start with some hypotheses, we start with hunches, but we've got to get then scientific about it. And what's nice is we don't need to bolt things on anymore. We don't have to add that JavaScript tag thing anymore. We can get these insights now in a more turnkey fashion. And I think that is the game changer that will allow us to move away from that lift and shift philosophy to now build for purpose experiences that can transcend devices, channels, and basically future-proof your business.
That makes so much sense. Stop thinking of it as whether we have to choose between lift and shift or replatform, but more focus on built for purpose. I think that resonates so much. Just curious, the experience insights that these companies are getting, you're seeing the application of those across projects and across these, big and small scale engagements. How do they get better use out of the functionality of products that they have once they have these insights in hand?
Yeah, that's the other big question we get all the time, is that we've made this huge investment in MarTech, and we don't believe we're getting the full value of it. I've seen that go to such an extreme where they're not renewing their licenses for some of these big platforms, in the next year. I've seen all of the ad spend comes to a screeching halt because we couldn't wrap our arms around programmatic ad buying, and we're grappling with some of the platforms and the data. So I think the web-based tutorials and training are step one that your MarTech provided, but that's step one. I think knowing how to use the tools is half the battle. The other is rethinking the way your marketing organization works. Gone are the days where you own a channel and instead you're going to map your organization to the steps of your journey. Why shouldn't I have my media, side analytics, technology folks, even a lawyer in a pod that maps to my customer acquisition? Why shouldn't I have the same pod for servicing? And there's some overlap between the two, and some folks may need to bridge across. I think those ways of working with the platforms and enabling. And I think the last bit I'll say is the integrations. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of different flavors in your Lifesaver stack. Nothing wrong with that. But it just means it's on you to get those integrations right so that the handoffs and the handshakes, the customer doesn't feel them. That's first and foremost. But second of all, myself as a marketer, I don't want to experience those either. Those messy, complicated, brutal handshakes. That's what makes us all get frustrated and not want to show up at our desk in the morning, right? So you've got to look at those integrations with that lens of the employee experience and the customer experience hand in hand.
Yeah, it's interesting that you probably intentionally, but for me, it was really enlightening to hear it connect the idea of built for purpose, not just within the tech stack or the technology or the experience, but also within the organization. You build your teams for purpose as well. Awesome. Such good thoughts. I want to kind of wrap it with one more, and just really thinking about next level as teams are thinking about what that looks like. How do these companies and leaders take their customer insights from a capability in this built for purpose scenario you're describing all the way through to being a way of doing business?
I think it involves a lot of empathy and curiosity on behalf of everybody in the organization. It involves the willingness to take risk. And it is, this is the back to the test and learn days, right? The drumbeat that I had over a dozen years ago. I don't think that should change, but if anything, that's coming more front and center. And because we're all working remote right now, I think we just don't know what we don't know. So it's that level and degree of flexibility. It is that requirement for us to listen, really listen, and then take action from that. Gone are the days of the research report that I file in my shelf behind me. Whereas today we're going from insights to action with the immediacy that we as humans expect on a day-to-day basis with any brand that we interact with.
And to your point, at the organizational level and at the experience level and technology and everything in between, it's going from daunting to now digestible and doable, right? When you think about it as a test and learn culture, and we're testing and learning what's working and what's not, and then we're going to pivot and grow and move along the way. So I love that you and I have always shared that passion of, you can only be so wrong if you embrace that mentality, right? You can take small risks, big risks, if the point of success is much greater ahead of you with that attitude in mind. So
now risks are more, listen, they're backed now by more evidence, right? And in these risks are better informed today than they ever have been able to before. So there's no reason, you don't have that excuse anymore.
Absolutely. And that's the raising tide that raises all ships, right? Is you embrace the risk and you fall into it with data and evidence, and out the other side, you become a much more successful entity.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
I love it, Brandon. Thank you so much. Any final parting thoughts?
No, I think, listen, you and I both are embarking on some important business now more than ever in our respective roles. And I think, this is really something that is exciting. And this is the kind of stuff that gets me excited to wake up in the morning and show up at my desk. So
I was going to say, to your earlier point, this is the work that's fun to get up and go do every day. I love it. Thank you, sir. More to come. We'll talk about more fun stuff in the future. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jenny.